A friend of Nolan Wells just sat down on camera and broke his silence. The distress call, the final hours, all of it exposed. Now that's the title. But before you hear anything else, I need you to know what you're walking into. This is not a quick recap. This is not surface level. What follows is a full 40-minute breakdown. The evidence, the timeline, the contradictions, and the exposed forensic findings that have put this entire case under a microscope.
A good time, but something happened to where it necessitated you guys to get the boat up and running. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I had a girl come up to me and say, "Hey, your brother just got in a fight." And obviously I have a younger brother, and that's who she was talking about. And I was freaked out. So I walked over to the beach, and I didn't walk over. I ran over. I made a beeline. I didn't talk to anybody. Put my drink down and walked over there. And my brother was kind of angry, and there was a lot going on. But someone was getting pulled away. I don't know who it was. And my brother was like, "Oh, I just got in a fight, and this guy punched me in the face," and I punched him right back. And then went to the ground, and my brother put him in an arm bar. And
was Nolan involved in any of this?
Absolutely not. When I was over there, it was a bunch of younger guys like my brother's age, and I mean, Nolan. I never saw Nolan over there.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And okay, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
So you get ready to go. There's an issue with the boat.
Okay, yeah.
And this is what
this led up to that. That's what I was saying.
So the fight happened with your brother, or a little scuffle. I'm assuming that it was cleared up.
Right.
You got your brother out of that situation, and then how did you find out that this boat is sinking?
Well, I walk back over, and we're probably around each other for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't thinking anything of it. I pulled my brother off the beach, and I was just like, "Listen, get in the water, hang out with us, calm down." I mean, he was calm, but I didn't want anything else to happen, And so once I got back over to the boat, I got on the Triton, and the Triton had probably about 6 inches of water up to the transom. And I was freaked out because I'm good friends with Wyatt, and that was his boat. And, no water's coming out, no access water's coming out. And it was a big issue, because I think the reason was because there were so many people getting on and off the boat, and at some point the boat was very, very crowded, and there was just a lot of people on, so that it drags water in. And eventually, I think over time, we were out there for a couple hours, the boat just started filling up with water. So I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater. And so the motor wouldn't trim down. I mean, my buddy would go to trim it down from the console, and it'd trim down, and then it'd come right back up. And so Wyatt's trying to throw a rear anchor, so we're caught, and he's, yelling at people. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And eventually I'm yelling at other people, trying to tell them, calm down. The boat could possibly sink, and I'm not paying attention to everyone around me. I was paying attention to my buddy's boat. And that's what all my other friends that were on that boat were doing, trying to solve the problem.
So you're on the boat now. The water is getting up to the point where the boat may be disabled to where you couldn't get it out from Horn Island. So what happens after that?
Wyatt jumps in the water, tries to throw a rear anchor, and my buddy Meyer, you're sitting looking, trying to pull trash out the bilge. And the bilge is basically a pump that pulls the access water out the boat. So the bilge was failing to work. So any excess water was just sitting in the boat. It wasn't getting pumped out. And I looked over the gunnel, and I looked at the release hole for the bilge, and it was even with the water. So, I mean, we're all freaking out. All of our, we're not focused on anything else other than the boat. Well, then eventually my buddy Bart on the tide line is like, "I'm going to pull y'all out to where we're out of all this, all this chaos." Because we left at 4:30, and there were still just as many people there, if not more, than when we got there. I mean, probably around the same amount. I mean, it was crazy. There was a lot of people. And, eventually Bart pulls us out. You know, we left at 4:30, but we really weren't pulled out away from everybody. We were probably about a quarter mile out, and we had the towing strap pulled from, you know, Bart's port side cleat or starboard side cleat, and he was on our starboard side bow, and so it was rubbing on his power pole. So Bart turned around, pulled up next to our boat, and we were just trying to get it situated. So that's when Wyatt called Cito, and Wyatt was like, you know, calls him, because the cell service isn't great at the island, but once you can use your phone, but stuff might not just send, and like, I mean, it's not great cell coverage. And even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, you know, it was fine. Like we had, you know, enough cell coverage to make a phone call or shoot a text over, but you don't have enough cell coverage to like send a picture, for example. So Wyatt.
So I want to go back.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I want to touch on that real quick, because the phone thing came up at some point. And so was it when you guys got off the boat?
Yeah.
I mean, were people taking their phones off the boat, or is that not typical? Because I know that Nolan's phone was left on the boat,
Right.
even though, you know, after you guys had left. So can you explain that? Because I think people need to understand this a little clearer.
Yeah.
Was it typical for people to have their phones left on boats, or did they keep their phones in the water? Or?
Yeah. I mean, everybody kind of goes out to the island to get away from, you know, their phones and everything else. I know I got on the boat to get away from, you know, just the regular world. And no, when you're waist deep in water, no one's carrying their phone in their hand, especially at Horn Island. The water has been very, very murky because of the rain. And when it's just very risky. If you're gonna have your phone in the water, you know, some people might for a couple minutes and like maybe taking some pictures of each other. You know, I know a lot of girls like to take pictures in the water at Horn Island. You know, guys do too. You know, like people like to take pictures, and but a lot of the pictures you see are on the boat for a reason. And so, no, I mean, if someone is on their phone in the water, they're using it real quick and then putting it right back on the boat. We were all waist deep in water. No one's sitting there scrolling on their phone. I never saw that once, and I've never seen that once. And I've been out the Highland my whole life. I mean, that's just not something people do. People aren't on their phones, and everybody has their phone, yes, but it's always on the boat. No one's getting off the boat with their phone. So.
And so you guys get ready to leave out of there. You're getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was. The last time I saw Nolan was 3:00, and Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie. Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, "Dude, you crazy?" I was like just joking with him, and but anyway, Nolan. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving, obviously, no one is getting left at the island that came with us unless they demanded to, you know, be there and asked, you know. This is a very common thing at Horn Island. When you're out there, a lot of people ride out there with someone and in with somebody else all the time. I've done that 100 times. You know, it's a very common thing. But Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues. And like, no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear, but it's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on the boat. Nolan, get on the boat. Get on the boat. We're leaving.
An 18-year-old, strong swimmer, college athlete, went to an island with his best friends on the 4th of July. Every single one of them came home, except him. And now, one of those friends is finally talking. But what he said on camera and what the evidence actually shows are two very different things. Do not skip ahead. Do not skim through this one. Sit with it, start to finish, because this case is deeper than anything they've told you so far. 3 p.m. That is the last confirmed time anyone says they saw Nolan Wells alive. The boat doesn't leave until 4:30. That's 90 minutes. 90 minutes on a small barrier island with his closest friends, and not one person can tell you with certainty what Nolan was doing. Let's go back to the beginning of that day. Because to understand what the gap means, you have to understand what the day looked like before it. 9:56 a.m., the group leaves a private dock in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Multiple boats. Warren Hudson, one of Nolan's closest friends, later describes the immediate party as 20 to 30 people, spread across 3 vessels, heading out to Horn Island for the 4th of July. Now, Horn Island on Independence Day is not quiet. It is packed. Thousands of people boat out there every year. Music, crowds, people everywhere. A full holiday on the water. Warren says Nolan was doing fine that morning, laughing, joking, nothing out of the ordinary. And on the surface, that tracks. It's a holiday, friends, sunshine, water. But here's what you need to understand about Horn Island itself. It's a barrier island, Gulf of Mexico, part of Gulf Island's national seashore. No residents, no buildings, no surveillance cameras, no infrastructure of any kind. Nothing but sand and open water. What that means, practically, is this. If something happens on Horn Island, the only people who know what happened are the people who were there with you. No cameras to check, no footage to pull, no independent witnesses with no stake in the story. Just the people in your group, and whatever they decide to say. Now, 3 p.m. Let's pin this down precisely, because this is the moment the timeline stops making sense. Judge Ashley Cole, Warren Hudson's mother, states that her son last saw Nolan at approximately 3 p.m. that afternoon. That's the last confirmed sighting, publicly reported, from anyone in that group. After 3 p.m., nothing. No confirmed location, no confirmed activity, no independent witness who has publicly placed Nolan Wells somewhere specific, doing something specific. Now, Warren's account of what happened next goes like this. He says the group started preparing to leave, and they encouraged Nolan, repeatedly, to get on the boat with them. But Nolan said no, he wanted to stay on the island. His reason, according to Warren, he'd met a young woman that day, Katie McCormack, and he wanted to spend more time with her. That's the friend's version. Nolan made a choice. He stayed voluntarily. But Nolan's family doesn't accept that version. Not even close. The people who knew Nolan best say he had every intention of leaving with the group. That voluntarily staying behind on an uninhabited island alone at night was not something Nolan Wells would do. Not something that fits who he was. And here's where that version gets complicated further. Katie McCormack, the young woman Nolan allegedly chose to stay behind for, her family has publicly disputed parts of the narrative surrounding that story. The specific details they're disputing haven't been fully released, but the fact that they're pushing back on the one explanation meant to justify why Nolan wasn't on that boat, that's not a small thing. That's a hole in the story. So you have the friends saying Nolan chose to stay for a reason that the girl's own family is now disputing. And you have Nolan's family saying he planned to leave with everyone else. Both of those cannot be true. At least one of them is wrong. And right now, neither side has produced a witness who was standing next to Nolan Wells at 3:15 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. or 4 p.m. and can say with certainty, here is what he was doing, here is what he said, here is where he was going. That silence, that's the 90 minutes. Right there. Okay, now watch how the timeline stacks up, because this is where it gets important. 3 p.m., last confirmed sighting of Nolan, according to Warren's own mother. 4 p.m., a distress call goes out from that boat. The caller reports a bilge pump failure, states there are 7 people on board. 4:30 p.m., the boat departs Horn Island. Now, authorities have stated that Nolan Wells was not on that vessel when it left. His friends say he chose to stay behind. The official position is he wasn't there. But the caller told the CETO dispatcher there were 7 people on board. 7. And that number has never been publicly explained. Nobody has stepped forward to account for who all 7 people were. Nobody has named them. Nobody has confirmed that the count of 7 excludes Nolan and still adds up correctly. So the caller says everyone's aboard. Authorities say Nolan wasn't there. The caller gives a head count of 7. The friends say Nolan chose to stay. None of those things can all be true at the same time. At least one of them is wrong, and the investigation has not publicly resolved which one. Between 3 p.m. and 4:30 p.m., 90 full minutes, not one witness has placed Nolan Wells in a specific location doing a specific thing, on a crowded island, surrounded by thousands of people, including his own friends. 90 minutes, and nothing. Now here's the part that cuts straight through everything else. Nolan Wells is not reported missing until the night of July 4th. After the group is already back on the mainland, not before they left the island, not during the boat ride back, after. And this is the part I need you to sit with. Not one person on that boat before pulling away from Horn Island called the Coast Guard. Not one person contacted local marine authorities. Not one person filed a welfare request. No call saying, hey, our friend is still out there on that island. Can someone go check on him? Make sure he's okay. Nothing. They left an island, alone. On July 4th, at night, and the first call to any authority came hours later, after they were already back on the mainland. Now, people will say, maybe they thought he had a ride. Maybe they thought he was fine. Maybe there was a miscommunication. Maybe. But those are explanations, and explanations aren't the same as answers, because the question isn't what they thought. The question is, what did they know? And 90 unaccounted minutes on an island with no cameras means the only people who can answer that question are the people who were there. So the timeline tells us this. 90 minutes that nobody can account for. A boat that left without making a single welfare call. And a young man found in the water 2 days later. Now the question shifts. Shifts away from where Nolan was and toward what the body found on that shore actually told investigators. Because the autopsy doesn't give you clean answers. It gives you something far more troubling than that. July 6th, 2026. 2 days after the 4th, a search crew finds the body of Nolan Xavier Wells near the west end of Horn Island. He's in the water, and from that moment forward, every answer this investigation needs has to come from what that body can tell them. The state moves quickly. An initial autopsy is conducted, and then the district attorney steps in and orders every finding from that examination sealed, pending grand jury review, no cause of death released, no official conclusions made public, nothing. The family is not going to wait on that. They bring in attorney Ben Crump, and they commission a second autopsy, an independent one, done on their behalf by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a forensic pathologist hired specifically to go through this evidence without the state controlling the process. Dr. Mitchell conducts the examination, and his preliminary finding comes back with 4 words that matter enormously. Cause and manner of death, undetermined, pending investigation. Now, I need you to understand exactly what that means, because a lot of people hear undetermined and think it's a placeholder. It's not. Undetermined doesn't mean accidental. It doesn't mean natural causes. It doesn't mean the doctor ran out of time. It means the evidence on hand cannot definitively explain how this person died. That is a significant forensic finding, and it leaves the door open in every direction. But Dr. Mitchell doesn't stop at undetermined, because during that second examination, he finds something specific. Something that Ben Crump takes straight to a press conference. On the back of Nolan Wells' head, in the soft tissue, Dr. Mitchell identifies a focal area of red discoloration. Crump publicly describes the size, approximately 12 by 8 inches, located in the lower portion of the skull region. 12 by 8 inches. That is not a small area. So the immediate question becomes, what caused it? Dr. Kendall Von Crowns, a chief medical examiner with no connection to this case, weighs in, and her answer is not simple. She says the discoloration could represent decompositional changes of the musculature, or it could be from blunt force injury to the back of the head and neck. Two possibilities, one finding, and they mean completely different things. Decompositional change happens naturally after death. It's a biological process. It does not indicate foul play. Blunt force injury to the back of the head is something else entirely. Standing alone, Dr. Von Crowns makes this clear, the discoloration does not confirm blunt force trauma, but it does not rule it out either. Dr. Mitchell himself states he cannot conclusively determine the origin of that discoloration without further analysis. He notes it in his report, flags it, and moves forward. That distinction matters more than it sounds, because decompositional change and blunt force injury are not the same thing. And the difference between those two explanations is the difference between an accident and something else entirely. Now, here is where this chapter reaches its most critical point. Pay close attention to this. In any case involving a body recovered from water, certain structures in the neck are examined first, because they tell you things nothing else can, the anterior neck structures. Specifically, the trachea, the hyoid bone, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid cartilage. These are not minor anatomical details. These structures can indicate whether a person was conscious when they entered the water. They can reveal whether there was any compression or force applied to the neck. They are foundational to determining how someone ended up in the water in the first place. Dr. Mitchell goes to examine them, and they're not there. Those structures were not included with Nolan Wells' body when it arrived for the second examination. They were gone. Now, let that sit for a moment without adding anything to it. A forensic pathologist sits down to conduct an independent autopsy on a case with no confirmed cause of death, on a body recovered from water under disputed circumstances. And the structures most critical to answering the central question are missing. Dr. Mitchell puts his conclusions in writing. In their absence, he states explicitly, he cannot rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to or cause of Nolan's death. He cannot determine whether Nolan was conscious when he entered the water. He cannot determine whether Nolan went in on his own, and then he writes something that cuts to the core of this entire investigation. He states, in writing, that the condition of Nolan Wells before he entered the water would be the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter. Those are Dr. Mitchell's exact words. And the evidence that could answer that question is gone. The structures that could have told investigators the most important thing in this entire case were not there when the independent examiner needed them. And it goes further than that. Dr. Mitchell also notes something else in his report. He states he could not rule out the possibility that non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death. Non-accidental factors. Non-accidental. Again, that is not a conclusion of guilt. It is a forensic statement. It means that based on what he examined, he cannot eliminate that possibility. That's what the independent autopsy leaves you with. Now, the state's autopsy exists alongside all of this, but you cannot read it. Nobody outside the investigation can. It's sealed. What it says, whether it agrees with Dr. Mitchell, whether it conflicts, unknown. And the toxicology report, the chemical analysis of what was or wasn't in Nolan's system that day, that's sealed too. But here's something that matters. A toxicology report started circulating on social media. People were sharing it, citing it, treating it as the official record. Officials confirmed it directly. That report is fraudulent. It is not real. It is not the actual toxicology finding from this case. The real report has not been released. The family is waiting on it. The public is waiting on it. And until the grand jury convenes and reviews the full evidence, it stays locked. So where does that leave you? A state autopsy that nobody can read. An independent autopsy that says undetermined. A red discoloration on the back of the skull that could be decomposition or could be trauma. and the neck structures that could have answered the most important question in this case, missing. So the body gives you a red discoloration that could be trauma and could be decomposition. It gives you missing neck structures that make cause of death impossible to fully determine. And it gives you a forensic pathologist who, in his own words, cannot rule out that non-accidental factors contributed to this death. The evidence from the body doesn't close this case. It blows it wide open. Now, the friend who was there, who was with Nolan that day, who just sat down on camera for the first time, what did he actually say, and does any of it hold up? Right here, before we get to Warren's interview. If you are watching this and you have not subscribed yet, do it right now, because what we just broke down, the missing neck structures, the undetermined cause of death, the forensic split between two medical experts, that level of detail is exactly what this channel is built on. August 11th, 2026. More than a month after Nolan Wells' body was pulled from the water near Horn Island, Warren Hudson sits down on camera with two other friends from that trip, Jax Patalo and Morgan Seymour, and a law enforcement officer present in the room. For the first time since July 4th, they talk. Now, let's go through exactly what Warren said, in order, without interruption, because you need to hear the full account before you see where it starts to break. Warren says Nolan was in good spirits that day, happy, laughing, joking around, nothing unusual, nothing that stood out. Warren also says he wasn't watching Nolan specifically. There were hundreds of people on that island. He was socializing broadly, moving around, talking to different people. Warren says the group made repeated efforts to get Nolan on the boat before they left, multiple attempts. And Warren says one member of the group was, in his words, panicking, yelling directly at Nolan, "Nolan, get the F on the boat." But according to Warren, Nolan said no. Every time, said he wanted to stay on the island, said he wanted to spend more time with Katie McCormack. Warren then addresses the two things the public has been loudest about. First, any involvement in Nolan's death. Warren denies it, flatly, on camera. Second, Nolan's phone. Warren denies that anyone touched it, denies any tampering of any kind, says it directly, looking into the camera. Warren and Jax both address the fallout from the public scrutiny, the threats, the inability to go out in public without their heads, and this is Warren's phrase, always on a swivel. That's Warren's account, start to finish. Now let's look at where it holds and where it doesn't. Start with the McCormack piece. Because this is the foundation of Warren's entire explanation for why Nolan stayed. The reason Nolan didn't get on the boat, according to Warren, is Katie McCormack, a young woman Nolan had just met that day. He wanted to stay for her. That's the explanation. That's the justification for leaving him behind. But Katie McCormack's own family has publicly disputed parts of that narrative. The specific details they're disputing haven't been fully released, but the direction of their pushback is clear. The one person who was supposedly the reason Nolan chose to stay has family members who are saying that account is not accurate. That's not a minor inconsistency. That is a direct conflict with the central explanation for why Nolan Wells was left on that island. Now, Warren says he was worried about Nolan, says the group was concerned. But here's where that concern runs into a hard wall of fact. That concern never produced a phone call. Not to the Coast Guard, not to Marine authorities, not to anyone. No welfare request was filed before that boat left Horn Island. No alert was sent saying, "Our friend is still out there. Can someone check on him?" Warren says he was worried. The evidence says no call was made. If you're genuinely worried about a friend, you make a call. You tell someone. One call, 30 seconds. That call was never made. Now, the phone. When Nolan's phone was returned to his family, his entire Snapchat history for July 4th was blank. No photos, no videos, nothing. For an entire day. On a holiday. On Horn Island. Nolan's mother has said publicly that he documented everything, every hangout, every gathering, a blank Snapchat on 4th of July from an 18-year-old who never put the camera down, didn't sit right with anyone who knew him. Warren's explanation on camera: it was common practice on Horn Island for people to leave their phones on the boat while they gathered in the water. Keys, wallets, phones. He says Nolan's phone was on the boat, not with him. That's his answer. The phone was on the boat, accessible to the group. And then Warren says directly, nobody touched it. Now, body language expert Susan Constantine reviewed the interview footage, and her assessment was specific. She said Warren showed indicators of deception, and she pinpoints exactly when. When he stated that no one touched Nolan's phone. She is careful, she makes it clear. This does not establish foul play. This is not forensic evidence. This is professional opinion based on behavioral cues. But here is the thing. Body language analysis is not forensic evidence. It is professional opinion, full stop. But when you pair that assessment with a blank Snapchat on a holiday and a phone that was sitting on a boat accessible to everyone in that group, it becomes a question. A direct, specific, unanswered question. And Warren's denial on camera hasn't closed it. Now, the audio. You already know what's in that recording. You already know what people claim to hear in the background. We're not going back through that. But here's the conflict that matters right now, specifically about one voice. Ben Crump, the family's attorney, stated at a press conference that the background voice on that distress call is Nolan, demanding his phone back. Crump said you can hear Nolan in the audio arguing with someone on that boat. Friend Javon Williams pushed back immediately. Williams said that voice isn't Nolan. He says it belongs to Trayston Shepard, another member of the group, who was having a completely separate argument on the boat. Williams says he was the one trying to calm that situation down. Trayston Shepard then confirmed Williams' account himself, on record. His words, those were not Nolan's words, they were mine. So you have two entirely different explanations for the same voice on the same recording. The family's attorney says it's Nolan, two members of the friend group say it isn't, and without verified audio forensics from a completely neutral party, this conflict remains exactly where it is, unresolved. Now, there's one more thing that came out of this period, and it happened after the interview. More than a month after Nolan's body was found, Warren Hudson and Jax Patalo returned to Horn Island. They don't go quietly, they bring attorneys, and they retrace their steps. Going back over the ground they covered on July 4th, the stated purpose of that trip has not been publicly clarified. No detailed explanation was given for what they were looking for, or what they hoped to find. People grieve in different ways. That's true. Grief takes different forms. But returning to a location where your friend died more than a month later, with legal representation by your side, that isn't typically what grief looks like. That's what preparation looks like. Warren talked for over an hour on camera. And when it was over, the family still had no answers. The contradictions are still standing. The phone is still unexplained. The voice on that recording is still disputed. And the grand jury that will decide whether any of this amounts to criminal charges is still waiting. What happens next? Where the investigation actually stands right now? And what the sealed evidence could mean for everyone involved? Right now, as of this video, there are no charges, no confirmed cause of death, no public toxicology report, and everything that investigators have gathered since July 4th is sealed, locked behind a grand jury process that hasn't concluded yet. That's where this case lives today. The district attorney overseeing this investigation has been clear about one thing. All evidence stays sealed until it is presented to the grand jury. No exceptions, no previews, no leaks sanctioned by the office. The grand jury's job, when it convenes, is to look at everything collected since July 6th. The investigative materials, the interviews, the state's autopsy findings, the toxicology results, all of it. And then decide one thing. Does this evidence support criminal charges? And if it does, against whom? Now, here's what sealed actually means in practical terms. For the family, for the public. It means the state conducted its own autopsy on Nolan Wells, and nobody outside that investigation has read it. Not the family, not their attorneys, not the public. That report exists. It is complete and it is locked. The independent autopsy, the one Dr. Mitchell conducted, that one is public. That one says undetermined. But there are two autopsies in this case. One that the world can see and one that nobody can. And they may not say the same thing. That gap between what the public knows and what investigators are holding is where this entire case currently sits. And it is not a small gap. It is the difference between a community with answers and a community still waiting. And that waiting has not been quiet. 3 people have now been criminally charged, not for anything connected to Horn Island, not for anything connected to what happened to Nolan, but for making threats against a judge, against a witness, and against local officials directly connected to this investigation. 3 separate people, 3 separate charges. And here's the detail that matters most about those 3 individuals. None of them appear to have any direct connection to Nolan Wells, not to his family, not to the friend group, not to the boat. They are members of the public, strangers to this case, who felt strongly enough about what they were watching to cross a legal line. Officials have had to step forward publicly, call for calm, address the threats directly. That doesn't happen in cases where the outside pressure is manageable. That level of public response tells you something, not about guilt or innocence, but about trust. This case has moved beyond the investigation. It has fractured a community. And the threats, while legally wrong, are coming from people who feel like the system they're watching cannot be trusted to deliver a fair result. That is the atmosphere surrounding everything we've covered in the last 4 chapters, and you cannot understand the full weight of this case without acknowledging it. Now, let's talk about the context, directly, without editorializing, because it is a documented part of why this case became national news, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Nolan Wells was black. Every friend from his high school group on that boat was white. And this happened in Mississippi. That combination, those 3 facts together, is not incidental to the public response. It is central to it. The protests, the media coverage, the involvement of Ben Crump, the national attention that arrived within days of Nolan being reported missing. All of it connects to a history that Mississippi carries, a history that shapes how people interpret official explanations when a black teenager goes missing in a predominantly white environment. And the initial response from authorities is, he chose to stay. The investigation has to be evaluated on evidence. That's the only way justice works. That is true, and it matters. But you cannot understand why this case exploded nationally without understanding what it means for a black 18-year-old to go missing on an island in Mississippi, and have the official explanation be that he chose to stay there alone. That context doesn't determine what happened. It doesn't determine guilt or innocence, but it determines how much trust exists between the community and the institutions investigating the case. Right now, that trust is fractured. And in the middle of all of it, there's a mother. Christine Wansley has spoken publicly, multiple times, and every time her position is the same. The pain of losing her son is immeasurable, and her family's focus is singular, finding out what happened to Nolan. Not the media coverage, not the online debate, not the threats, not the politics of it. What happened to her son? Ben Crump and his team are still working. The independent investigation running parallel to the official one is ongoing. The audio analysis is ongoing. The forensic review is ongoing. The last thing Christine Wansley heard from Nolan was, "I love you." And right now, that's still the last clear thing she has. because everything after it is still being determined. So let's put it all on the table, one final time. Clean, no embellishment. Here is what this case still cannot answer. Who was aboard that boat when the distress call was made? What happened between 3 p.m. and 4:30 p.m.? Whose voice is in the background of that audio? Why is Nolan's Snapchat history blank for the entire day of July 4th? What caused the red discoloration on the back of his head? What happened to the anterior neck structures before the second autopsy? And did Nolan Wells stay on that island by choice, or was he left there? 7 questions. Open. Unanswered. Right now. Today. An 18-year-old, a strong swimmer, a college athlete, went to an island with his closest friends on the 4th of July. The friends came home. He did not. The body was found. The autopsy said undetermined. The evidence is sealed. The friend finally talked, and the contradictions are still standing. This case is not closed. It is not resolved. The grand jury that holds the next move in this investigation has not spoken yet, and when it does, this channel will be here, breaking it down, fact by fact, line by line, because that's the only way Nolan Wells gets the truth he deserves. This case is still developing. The grand jury hasn't ruled, the sealed evidence hasn't dropped, and the moment it does, we will be the first ones breaking it down on this channel, with the same depth you just watched for the last 40 minutes. Every document, every finding, every contradiction. Subscribe right now to DAV Crime Records. Turn on every notification, because when the next chapter of the Nolan Wells case breaks, you need to be here. Don't miss it.